A black Pacific sky. A single green pip glows on the SJ radar, 10-centimeter waves cutting the dark like a surgeon's knife, and Commander Richard H. O'Kane breathes a bearing that turns midnight into a map. USS Tang, SS-306, rides low and mean, Palau-class pressure hull humming as diesels idle and the battery takes the load. The periscope is down because the ocean is full of eyes. The target-bearing transmitter is steady under red lights. The Mark III TDC murmurs its analog calculus, while a quartermaster traces grease pencil courses. Think before you speak, O'Kane taught, and the bridge crew learned to make silence work like a weapon. Tang came from Mare Island, launched the 17th of August, 1943, forged by men who knew steel frames and riveted pride. Now she carries their hands to war. Japanese escorts once trusted the moonless watch. But American radar strips night of its mystery. The operator reads ranges and bearings with the cool cadence of a metronome. Sweat beads under his phone set. Salt stings lips. Someone tastes cordite from last week's gunnery like a ghost on the tongue. The order is simple and American. Do your utmost. Tang answers with wake-white streaks as torpedoes leave the tubes, the boat rolling gently as compensating tanks take the sudden weight shift. The hit lands like a door slamming underwater, a metal howl that tells grown men the physics are on our side. Searchlights lurch awake and claw empty water while the sub is no longer where their anger points. In the control room, hands work the planes and trim. In the torpedo room, men whisper to the steel fish as if the guidance gears can still hear. We are far from California, but the night feels like home because our tools make it so. The holy shit truth sits right here, less than 2% of the US. Navy, its submariners will go on to sink more than half of Japan's merchant fleet. That number is not bravado. It is freight bills that never arrive, factories that go silent, and soldiers ashore who never get fuel. O'Kane's voice stays level. The boat eases to new depth. The screws of angry destroyers pass overhead like freight trains on a wooden bridge. Steady, a plainsman says, barely above breath. Dawn will keep our secrets, but the chart will not. Another thin line will get a date, tonnage, and a location neat enough to make the chaos feel like work well done. Night used to be the enemy's ally. Tonight it is American ground, measured in yards and seconds and nerve. The bridge team wipes salt from binoculars, the log closes, and the next lane calls like an unpaid debt. We are small in silhouette and enormous in reach, a floating math problem with teeth, and the ocean has learned our language. Dusk turns the sea to slate as Tang fires a single 4-inch divided by 50 Mark 9 round just to watch the splash on radar. The SJ scope returns the exact range of that fountain of water, and a seaman with a pencil writes the number big so the night crew can see it at a glance. When darkness falls, the gun already sees. This is the American handshake between big guns and electronics, a marriage that saves torpedoes for hard kills and lets us finish a crippled freighter before shore batteries wake up. Down in the ready locker, the ammunition passers know the rhythm. Shell, case, slam. The pointer sings out corrections. The trainer keeps the silhouette centered. The Oerlikon 20mm on the Fairwater stands by like a boxer bouncing on his toes. The deck is slick, the air wet, and everything smells like oil and iron. Someone's hands burn through the cotton of their gloves, and he doesn't mention it because the next round is up. The scope gives truth. Our hands do the rest. A gun captain mutters, and there is no poetry there, only practice. Old rules said to hug the coastline if you wanted safety, but a low black American hull now ghosts in along that same coast and puts steel on target by invisible math. How can a submarine fight like a destroyer at midnight? Radar ranges feed the sights. TBT bearings feed the TDC. The helmsman keeps Tang's nose where the gun crew needs it. The boat becomes one machine with many American parts. The enemy's shock crackles over radios and breaks in the panicked wails of a pier siren that comes on late and leaves early. You can feel the holy shit tempo in your bones. Approach on radar. Strike with Mark 18 or Mark 14 torpedoes. Finish with the deck gun, and vanish in less time than it takes to smoke a cigarette. We never confuse cruelty with efficiency. If a lifeboat appears, we mark its position for rescue craft. If a gun opens on us, we answer clean and fast. Somewhere in the conning tower, a coxswain hisses, "Back full!" and the prop wash glows for a heartbeat before Tang melts back into the seam between wave and night. There is no swagger here. There is competence, drilled until the body does what the mind needs before the clock punishes hesitation. We rescue when we can, we kill when we must, and we never waste time explaining the difference. Tomorrow's chart will mark a wreck and a save 2 lines tied to a single idea. America fights to end wars and bring our people home. The sea swallows the noise as if it agrees, and the bow turns toward another lane where radar will make darkness honest again. Depth charges roll from a bucket rack and thud like giant fists into the black. The water column shivers, light bulbs pop, the inclinometer jitters. The petty officer on the planes looks like a statue built from sweat. The boat slides below the number stamped on her plate, because the war doesn't respect labels. At 600 feet, the hull sings a low iron hymn that every submariner knows. At 612 feet, Tang proves her true test depth, not guessed, not bragged, but watched as a needle kisses a pin and then comes home. A gauge line bursts and scalding spray fogs the air. A machinist's mate rams a raw potato into the split, clamps it with a hardware store mindset, carried into war, and the leak becomes a damp memory. This is American fieldcraft turned doctrine. If it spins, seals, or burns, we fix it now. How do you live where sonar loses you and pressure wants to crush you? Is not a seminar question. It is the difference between family letters and next of kin telegrams. The answer is layered steel from yards that listened to skippers, drills that ran until muscle memory overruled panic, and a kind of quiet faith in one another. The destroyer above rips the sea with screws like a chainsaw through oak. Then comes the long hiss of bubbles, and nothing else, our favourite sound. A torpedo man, hands still shaking, whispers to the boat, "Hold, girl," and counts out the seconds through a charge pattern that feels like an hour. In the control room, a voice finally says, "All stop," and it is a prayer shaped like an order. When Tang rises, it is not bravado, it is opportunity. The deep is not a limit. It is our sanctuary, the place where physics helps Americans who came ready to meet it. The holy shit detail is the number. 612 feet. A proof of what the yard built and the crew dared. That margin of depth changes everything, how long we evade, when we re-attack, where we wait for darkness to move again. Above, searchlights skitter across empty water. A flare hisses down like a 6-star. Our wake has already cooled to ink. Someone passes a battered mug of coffee to the man who jammed the potato. Someone else laughs because the world kept turning. The boat lives, so a convoy will not, and that equation has weight. Americans learned the deep and then made it work for freedom. And the next patrol will turn survival into habit, habit into tempo, and tempo into shock for the enemy who thinks pressure is his ally. Imagine a chart table littered with pin flags and dates, pencil arcs tracing stalks, attack courses, and egress turns. Now imagine one submarine averaging a ship sunk every 11 days. That submarine is USS Tang, and that pace is twice the rate of the next best. The kind of number an officer double-checks before he dares say it aloud. This is not casino luck. It is cadence approach. Shoot, break contact, reset beaten into muscle and mind by training that cut words, seconds, and mistakes. O'Kane taught brevity until the bridge spoke like a switchboard. The TDC took bearings and speed and turned them into solutions with mechanical grace. The torpedoes left clean because the crew treated every step like a ritual you do with your whole body. Talk less, kill more, a sailor mutters, and the watch smiles because the line is crude and true. Can process beat fear at sea? It can when the process is American, mission-type orders that trust a skipper, an industrial base that fixes lessons between patrols and crews who see every drill as life insurance. Convoys try new routes, slow to throw off sonar guesses, speed to outrun a shadow no one sees. The ledger still fills. The yeoman writes dates and tonnage until the column looks unreal, and yet the ocean keeps agreeing. The holy shit fact sits plain as ink. A ship every 11 days, patrols ranked among the greatest in more than 1,000 war patrols, and a captain who will later survive captivity and refuse to let his record turn into a boast. The enemy's shock moves through staff rooms like a quiet disease. Someone charts losses on a wall map, pins clustering along straits and coasts once called safe, and no one wants to be the man who explains the curve. We are small in headcount and enormous in consequence, a decimal point on the roster and a wrecking ball on the map. The question becomes a bridge. What happens when that same precision turns toward saving our own? The answer shows up with surf foam on a black bow, a line-throwing gun fired true, and a shivering pilot yanked from a raft, while shore guns bark too late. The cadence that kills with discipline rescues with the same calm hands, and that is a kind of victory only power can afford. A yellow raft bobs near a coral shelf. Tracer fire walks the water like angry needles. A black submarine edges in with engines ready to slam astern. Hands reach. Wet flight gear thumps the deck. A blanket lands on bony shoulders. You owe us a steak. Someone grins, because jokes are the rope that pull panic back to the boat. That same sub will hunt at dawn. Rescue and raid share fuel, batteries, and radar, not by accident, but by design. From a navy that believes winning the war includes bringing Americans home, Tang's ledger shows 22 naval aviators saved in 7 pickups under enemy guns, the kind of number that earns a presidential unit citation and, more important, a warm meal and a second chance. A rescued flyer, teeth chattering, gets a mug of coffee he can't hold steady and whispers, "I thought I was dead." And a boatswain's mate answers, "Not on our watch. What kind of force can pull you from hell at night and deliver hell the next morning?" American confidence built on long range, sensors, and character freedom expressed as action. The enemy's shock is almost comic if it weren't so lethal. A shore battery commander learns the submarine he shelled just robbed him of a victory and slipped away to kill his convoy at first light. The holy shit detail is that lifeguard duty isn't an intermission. It is woven into combat like a second heartbeat, search patterns on the same radar that finds freighters, timing so tight it feels like a magic trick until you see the drills behind it. A boat that can find one man in the dark can find a tanker. It's the same skill with a different moral weight. A coxswain feathers the screws to hold station without broaching. A lookout counts the rhythm of surf against reef to guess a safe path. The pharmacist's mate checks pupils and pulse and then grabs a line to help reload a torpedo, because on a sub, everyone is 2 jobs deep. The sun edges up pink and mean. The conning tower closes. The smell shifts from salt and sweat to oil and battery acid. The skipper taps the chart, and the boat answers by turning. Somewhere far inland, a family will later get a letter that begins, "Your son was recovered," and ends with more life than they dared hope for. Somewhere in Tokyo, a staff colonel will initial a convoy loss report that lands on his desk like a verdict. The same line connects both scenes. American power that saves its own and punishes the guilty in the same 12 hours. Here is the punch that seems like fiction until you run your finger along the numbers. U.S. submariners were less than 2% of the Navy, yet their boats destroyed more than half of Japan's merchant fleet, millions of tons that never reached a pier. Think about the engine behind that. Yards like Mare Island and Portsmouth taking frontline feedback and hardening frames, reseating periscope bearings, tuning SJ sets, swapping out bulky bits between patrols so that every submarine returned as a smarter version of itself. Commanders such as Vice Admiral Charles A. Lockwood read patrol reports with a hunter's eye and promoted men like Dudley, Mush Morton, Richard H. O'Kane, and Gene Flucky leaders who shaved seconds from approach rather than polishing paragraphs. Men who believed that speed and clarity are forms of mercy when lives hinge on them. Tokyo staff officers pinned red flags to a shipping map until it looked like a rash and wrote, in cautious prose, that submarines ranked among the top causes of imperial defeat. Factories do not run without oil, steel, or grain, and submarines strangled all three. A Japanese merchant sailor, later a POW, said softly to an interrogator, "Your submarines were always first at the horizon, and there is respect in that grief. Could any other nation have fused long-range, big guns, radar, industry, and a rescue ethos this fast and this well? No, and not because others lacked courage, but because America combined continent-scale production with mission-type command and a moral compass that made the same hull both lifesaver and executioner. The holy shit feeling comes from totals that bend belief, a tiny arm of the service choking a vast economy week after week, lane after lane, until the mainland starved for cargo that never came. Smell the diesel, hear the TDC's soft mechanical clatter, feel the breech block slam home, picture the quiet words on a bridge at 0200. These details add up to a national character expressed in steel and discipline. When Tang's final torpedo circled back in late 1944 and O'Kane became a prisoner of war, the record did not vanish. It grew heavier, because achievement and sacrifice weighed the same in the ledger of victory. "We did our utmost," he said when it was over, and the numbers nodded back. Add up the patrols across the fleet. Night turned American, the deep turned friendly, the shore turned vulnerable, the horizon turned honest. That is how a small brotherhood changed a continent's fate, and why the enemy finally understood the sea no longer belonged to them. The ocean remembers, and so do we. The Yellow Sea smells like rust and winter, and fear as a Balau-class boat holds a Black Dawn line off a choke point and waits for silhouettes to break the horizon. Range, fuel, and batteries are the real map, and American boats own all three. They sail from Fremantle, Pearl, and Midway, and overlap their patrol sectors until the sea lanes look like a woven net. A convoy appears small at first, then grows teeth. Escorts up front, freighters packed with ore and kerosene behind, and a tanker sitting fat in the middle like a dare. The skipper watches the SJ radar paint, a steady drumbeat of blips and murmurs, a course that makes geometry into hunger. The TDC takes bearing, angle on the bow, and speed, and returns a solution that feels like certainty. On the bridge, a lookout smells coal smoke, before the wind admits it, and the note passes quietly because words are expensive where shells are cheap. American dominance is not a boast, it is a schedule. Boats depart, boats arrive, and choke points from Lombok to Tsushima never feel empty again. Freight that left Dairen to feed Osaka's mills does not arrive. Drums that left Palembang to fuel destroyers never see a funnel. The ocean stops being a highway and turns into a toll road, where the toll is paid in steel, and time, and men. A petty officer traces a triangle on the chart and says nothing, because the triangle means the tanker will not make it. A question that no staff study can dodge grows inside the enemy's map room. How do you defend a coastline when the water itself has turned hostile? The answer, from the American side, is simple and hard mass patrol hours, radar that steals the night, and crews that can live on coffee and discipline until the work is done. A holy shit fact hides in the rhythm. Convoys reroute, slow, and scatter, and the losses barely bend. Even when air searches push subs down by day, the night belongs to the periscope, and the black deck gun, and the man with a pencil behind his ear, who has done this enough to be gentle with the paper. A junior officer thinks of the yards in California that beefed up frames because skippers asked and sent the boat back out better within weeks, and he grins at the democracy of its ideas travelling faster than cargo. The enemy's shock is not a scream. It is a slow silence in factories when the shift whistle blows and no ore clatters into hoppers. A millwright stands by a dead conveyor in Kobe and says nothing because he has already said everything he knows. On the water, the escorts turn to chase a phantom contact and leave a hole in the screen. The skipper calls for a spread. The tube crew breathes with the boat, and the sea takes the tanker as easily as a man puts down a cup. We mark the position of a lifeboat, send a contact report, and slip back into depth where the gauges glow, like hooded eyes. The bridge closes with a clank, the helmsman trims for neutral, and the sonar listens to the last pops of a dying ship. The ocean is ours not because we say so, but because the math and the men make it so, lane after lane, night after night, until even the horizon behaves. It is ugly and necessary and done with a kind of grim kindness that only confidence allows. By daybreak, the chart has one more grease pencil coffin, and America has one more notch in a ledger that is strangling an empire quietly enough to be decent and loud enough to be final. We are not many, but we are enough, and that is the most American sentence in the sea. In Pearl Harbor, a compact man with quick eyes reads a stack of patrol reports like a coach studying game film and decides the future will belong to the hunters. Vice Admiral Charles A. Lockwood promotes the skippers whose logs smell like cordite and salt, not ink and excuses, and the fleet changes in a month what some navies fail to change in a decade. Dudley Mush Morton takes USS Wahoo out like a blade, turns the classroom into wake foam, and teaches his executive officer Richard H. O'Kane the grammar of aggression. Close, fast, speak little, shoot clean, and leave the enemy arguing with the sea. Eugene Fluckey will soon take USS Barb to the home islands and prove that imagination can be a weapon when he lands a shore party that blows a train clean off the rails. An American act that says we will take the fight wherever the map allows. Command here is not a desk. It is character written into orders that tell captains to do their utmost and mean it. An ensign watches Lockwood talk to a young skipper in words that weigh like responsibilities. And he understands the quiet bargain authority in exchange for duty, ambition in exchange for results, and forgiveness withheld for those who fear the night. The revelation is cultural as much as technical. A democracy that trusts its people to decide at the edge of risk is a machine that makes courage renewable. American superiority becomes visible not only in radar ranges and hull frames, but in the way good ideas flow uphill and downhill without a choke point. A staff officer drafts a memo that removes useless phraseology from attack reports because seconds are lives, and somewhere far at sea, a bridge team speaks 3 words instead of 9 and buys enough time to fire first. The enemy's shock is personal. Skippers who wait for permission find themselves outgunned by men who are permission. Morton pushes through a screen that a manual says is impassable. O'Kane turns darkness into a firing line. Fluckey writes a patrol report that reads like a dare to the next man to be bold and smart at once. A holy shit fact hides in the personnel rosters, promotions traced to results, not rhetoric, and the ocean answers by giving way. Critics say aggression wastes torpedoes. The counters are ships that no longer sail, and factories that run out of feedstock by spring. An engineer at Mare Island reads a damage note and thickens a bracket because a captain said it barked at 500 feet. 2 patrols later, a charge walks in and the bracket holds, and somewhere that engineer sleeps better without ever knowing the names of the men he kept alive. This is what American command looks like when it works. Feedback hauling on a wrench, leadership cutting words until action fits inside, and crews who never mistake noise for courage. A Japanese intelligence summary lists captains as if names were the problem and never guesses that the problem is a culture that multiplies the right kind of men. On a humid night, a radio man copies 2 lines from ComSubPac that matter more than a book of orders. Be aggressive. Be smart. Ships burn, men are saved, and the horizon keeps moving because someone ashore read the right report and told the right man to go faster with care. We do not worship luck. We honor preparation that turns risk into choices, and choices into kills or rescues on purpose. By the time the moon rises over the channel, the fleet feels different, like a team that has found its playbook, and the enemy feels smaller than the map says he should be. The sea cares for none of this, but it notices when a nation knows itself well enough to let its best people reach for the throttle. A submarine slides into a floating dry dock at Mare Island looking like a veteran boxer, bruised, proud, hungry for another round, and the yard goes to work before the lines are made fast. Men in denim and leather gloves swarm the fair water, the periscope standards, the sound heads, speaking a language of taps and gauges and chalk marks, as if the boat had brought homework from the front. One patrol said the periscope bearing felt rough above 90 feet. The yard pulls the pedestal, polishes, races, and blue-checks the fit until it turns like a watch crown. A skipper wrote that the S.J. set drifted after 3 hours in tropical heat. An electrician installs a shielded lead, a better blower, and a simple check chart next to the scope so a tired operator can keep truth aligned with the sea. Another note mentions a bracket that shuddered under a near miss. The frames in that bay get thicker webbing and a new run of weld that looks like rope frozen in steel. American industry is not just big, it is attentive, and attention is a weapon. Engineers read patrol reports with salt still on them. Shops cut and hone and fit as if the names on the crew list were family. The miracle everyone cites is production. But the miracle that wins wars is iteration. A boat returns changed by contact, and leaves changed by learning. In the torpedo rooms, the talk is quieter, now that fixes have caught up with early war headaches. Electric marks slide where steamers once left wakes, exploders behave, and confidence returns like a friend you thought you'd lost. An old chief says nothing about the bad months, because the best apology is a weapon that works, and now they do. The revelation is simple enough to teach in a school, and hard enough to earn only in a free country. Ideas outrun pride. A junior yard worker hears a visiting skipper describe a raw potato fix to a burst gauge line and laughs. Then fabricates a cleaner, safer part, so the next fix is metal, not produce. A holy shit moment lives in the calendar. Weeks between patrols are enough for real changes, not paint and speeches, and boats sail out measurably tougher than they came in. The enemy cannot match the tempo because he must protect his yards from air raids and manage materials by decree rather than insight. Somewhere in Kure, a foreman hides good steel for a battleship. Somewhere in California, a foreman spends good steel on a bracket for a submarine because a machinist's mate wrote a line on a report. The difference shows up at 500 feet when the charge walks in and the bracket holds. On a warm afternoon, a test tank hums, while a radar tech simulates rain clutter. He writes a simple checklist: line, wipe, reseat, recal, as if he were packing a school lunch, and some night at sea a young operator follows it and turns static back into targets. A democracy is noisy at home and precise at sea when it counts. This is one of history's great jokes and gifts. The boat slides out of the dock with new zincs, fresh paint, tuned diesels, and a conning tower that feels like a cockpit. She is the same hull and not the same ship. She will test to depth, check the scope, and head back to the shipping lanes with a yard's fingerprints all over her, and those fingerprints will look like life the first time the ocean tries to erase her. The steel learns because the people do, and because the people are allowed to say what they learned out loud. The number is so lopsided it feels like a misprint until you follow the ships. Less than 2% of the United States Navy wore dolphins on their chests, and the boats they manned erased more than half of Japan's merchant fleet from the sea. A single sliver of sailors strangled an empire's arteries, while the rest of the fleet and the army and marines broke its bones. The combination is what wins wars fast enough to save lives you never meet. Trace a tanker from Sumatra headed for Yokosuka. Fuel for planes and destroyers mark her last known on a convoy sheet, then stop the line where a periscope saw her wake square across the bow at 0200. Trace a freighter loaded with Manchurian ore meant for Osaka's furnaces, then end that route with a spread of torpedoes that turned red-hot steel into cold silence. Do this 1,000 times, and you do not get a story. You get a math proof written by men who worked in 4-hour watches and measured victory by bearings and bravery. An officer in Tokyo signed loss reports with a tight jaw and later admitted that submarines ranked at the top of reasons for defeat. The factory graphs flatlined before the soldiers did. The revelation that makes you sit back is that American subs did not need to be everywhere. They needed to be where it hurt. Choke points, coasts, and predictable lanes took on a haunted look because an unseen enemy owned the conditions of the fight. The holy shit moment is when you learn how small the crews are, 80 or 90 men, on a boat that can change the week for a city that will never know their names. A machinist's mate swaps a bearing, a sonarman leans into his headphones and finds a heartbeat in the ocean. A quartermaster draws a line that closes a trap. The sum of these is a factory that doesn't open on Monday. American superiority here is not an insult to the other side's courage. It is a praise of our system's speed and honesty. Failures were named and fixed. Successes were studied and copied. Lieutenants became skippers because they delivered, and shipyards took instruction from the front rather than from their pride. A convoy commander decides to hug the coast because somebody told him subs fear shoals. A US boat comes in on radar and uses the deck gun to finish a job. Next week, the same commander risks blue water and loses ships where air cover can't help. This is how you lose when the other guy is both nimble and stubborn. Meanwhile, a lifeguard pickup pulls a downed flyer from surf, and the same boat sinks a freighter at dawn. Mercy and lethality share a logbook line and make sense together because the goal is victory that ends killing sooner. 2% is a fraction on paper. At sea, it felt like a truth you could touch, in diesel vibration and coffee steam, and the hush that comes after a good shot. By the time the last year of the war unfolds, the merchant fleet is a ghost with schedules that mean nothing. Even the proudest ships must sneak. The ocean belongs to those who can read it. And Americans read it out loud and in numbers. Open the patrol book and run a finger down the lines, and the pattern looks impossible until you feel the calluses behind it. A contact report at 0115, attack at 0133, 2 hits, break off, new approach at 0430, finish with the gun at 0510. Across her war, Tang earns rankings that sit at the top of more than 1,000 patrols, a pace so sharp it cuts years off, a conflict's worst possibilities. Her average one ship every 11 days feels like a typist's error, because navies are not supposed to be that efficient at night, in weather, under pressure, against escorts who can bite. Yet the boat keeps the tempo because the skipper drilled silence, the TDC made math into muscle, and the crew treated ritual like a friend. There is glory in the kills and there is honor in the saves. 22 aviators hauled from 7 pickups near beaches that spit tracer into the spray. A pilot lies on the deck, coughing up Pacific, and a sailor presses a mug into his hands and says, "Drink, brother," in a tone that makes the word literal. The enemy's shock in these scenes is a kind of double exposure, the same silhouette that steals a man from his grasp. It's at night, returns at dawn to punch a freighter in the gut, while the shore battery counts too slow. The holy shit factor is not just numbers, but the way the numbers live inside people. Men who can shoot in the dark can also steer by kindness without losing an ounce of edge. O'Kane's lessons from Wahoo ride with him. Close fast, pick the fat ship, be ready to finish, and never let noise crowd judgment. He does not narrate panic, he narrates choices, and that calm becomes contagious in a space the size of a small house filled with the voltage of a storm. In the control room, the plainsman watches the bubble like a heartbeat. The helmsman trims for neutral while charges tick like a cruel clock. The captain's voice threads through both like a steel cable. Industry backs them, frames that hold past 600 feet, scopes that stay true when the boat is hot, radar that sees rain for what it is and ships for what they are. The ledger is not shy about the last patrol either, because truth that hides is not American. A circular run by a torpedo turns the ocean into a trap set by our own hand. The explosion that follows is the sound of fate arriving right on time. Men die, men are thrown into the sea, and the survivors become prisoners of war. When O'Kane is pulled from the water and later stares at a wall instead of a sea, the record has already become a kind of monument. Tempo that saved friends he never met, kills that starved factories he never saw, rescues that built a country's memory of itself. He does not speak like a hero because heroes do not feel like heroes to themselves. He says only, "We did our utmost." And anyone who has ever stood a watch in danger recognizes the creed. The ledger closes with names that deserve to be said and dates that deserve to be kept. It reads like proof that training and trust can make a small crew bigger than a coastline. It sits now in archives and in the hearts of families and in the way shipyard workers hold their coffee cups. With hands that remember work that mattered. The boat is gone, the lesson is not. By the last year of the war, maps that once promised empire look like riddles with the answers rubbed out, and the sea that once fed the war machine has turned stingy and mean. Merchantmen sail in smaller numbers, at uncertain hours, under orders written in worry, and still too many never arrive. The arithmetic that wins does not shout. It drips. Another ship down on Wednesday. Another on Friday. A tanker that never leaves anchor because a captain heard a rumor that felt like truth. Add those drips across months and you get a drought. Add them across islands and you get a famine of fuel and steel and nerve. The American submarine force did this with long legs, big guns that spoke by radar at night, and a habit of iteration that turned complaints into corrections and corrections into kills. Less than 2% of the Navy strangled more than half the enemy's lifelines, and the rest of the force smashed what remained. The combination is the secret most histories underplay, because it is not a single battle you can film, it is 1,000 decisions you can respect. A factory in Kobe shutters on a Tuesday because ore does not come. A destroyer squadron fuels only 3 ships because the tanker list is fantasy. A garrison eats cold rice because the ship with stoves never tied up. These mundane humiliations add up to a grand collapse that looks sudden only to those who did not keep the books. The enemy's shock turns into a kind of admiration wrapped in defeat when senior officers later rank submarines at the top of reasons they lost. It is a bleak compliment, but it lands. The revelation that closes the circle is moral as much as mechanical. The same boats that killed efficiently, rescued bravely, pulled downed aviators out of waters guarded by guns, and brought them into spaces already too small for comfort because an American crew will always make room for one more. A holy shit moment. Worth remembering is not only a train blown off tracks by Barb's shore party or a tanker folding into itself under Tang's spread. It is also a sailor cutting a blanket in half so 2 men can stop shivering at once. The sound of victory here is not a cheer. It is a torpedo room, door dogging down, a scope bell ping, a single word on a bridge that means 4 jobs at once. We did not win because the other side was foolish. We won because we were fast learners and stubborn friends to one another. That is what a nation at its best looks like at sea. Daring that keeps its receipts. Power that tells the truth about its failures and fixes them. Mercy that does not ask for permission to act. If you want a number to take home, take this. A small brotherhood turned night into American ground and left an enemy so short of breath that entire cities felt it without understanding why. If you want a name to take home, take any you like from a watch bill and say it with respect. If you want a sentence to end a war with pride and grief balanced just right, take the one a tired captain used when the counting was done. We did our utmost. The horizon is quiet now. The ledger is closed. The ocean remembers.